Hey guys, what is up? Wow, we already have 14 people in here. That's awesome. It's just me and Alex today. Tyler had a little, conflict of schedule. So, Alex, how are you doing today, man? Oh, there's Tyler in the
I'm doing
comments.
pretty good. Excited to be here today and answer your questions and explain why I hate Penei Sewell.
We'll definitely get to Penei Sewell, man. I'm sure there's going to be a few questions about him. We already are getting some questions in the chat. So, James, we hear you. We'll talk about the Darisaw and Jenkins thing. But we do have a few questions via Patreon as well that we're going to get to that we'll dive into first. And, of course, we'll talk about the Penei Sewell thing as well.
We also do have, I was just going to say, we have the super chat feature enabled. So if you want to guarantee that we get to your question, you can just leave us a little super chat.
There we go. Good call, Alex. So, and if you missed it, Tyler did do, kind of a trade up mock where he kind of figured out a way to potentially trade up for Penei Sewell and how that would work out. So definitely go check that out after you tune into the live. Let's get started with these questions on Patreon first and foremost. We'll put the link to our Patreon in the description of this video after we finish. So if you're not on there already, please make sure and go check that out. There's a ton of cool benefits. All the videos that we've been putting out, they all go first on Patreon. So you get exclusive access to those. And then they go live on YouTube after a few days. So first question from Thomas Costello on our Patreon page. He says, before we hit the draft, any more thoughts on the Chargers' new coaching staff? Alex, why don't you take that one first?
I guess the thing that I'm interested to see is what exactly the offensive plan is from Joe Lombardi. We've heard some kind of vague terms like, oh, it'll be like the Saints and maybe more passing, but still an emphasis on the run game. I don't know if we have a real clear idea of what it's going to be, or at least not as clear of an idea on offense as we do on defense with Brandon Staley and Ronaldo Hill. So as we get closer to the season, and this will also be told by, which offensive players they take in the draft, I'm interested to see that, perhaps a tackle or two. And we'll see what happens. I'm just curious to see kind of what specific offense they want to build.
Yeah, Brandon Staley has talked about that he's going to adapt to the players, to their own strengths, right? He's going to build the offense around Justin Herbert. He's going to build the defense around Derwin James, Kenneth Murray, Joey Bosa. But yeah, it's going to be super interesting to see how they build this offense, because that was definitely something that Brandon Staley talked about. He wanted to bring in all these different ideas, different backgrounds. And there was some conversations today about a certain player in Baltimore being traded to the Chargers, which I don't think it is going to happen. But, there were some people saying that, well, he's not a scheme fit. He's not, this or that. And, to be fair, we don't really know. I don't think, the reason why I don't think the Orlando Brown trade is going to happen is not because he doesn't fit the scheme, because we don't know that, frankly. It's more of just a financial standpoint of things. But it's going to be very interesting to see what kind of influence, Shane Day and the Shanahan system have on it. What kind of influence the Saints offense has on it, and of course what they were able to bring in last year. So I'm really excited to see how this offense builds out for sure. Next question from Riley Williams. He says, give us your blazing hot takes or predictions about the draft in general and some mark my word takes for the draft and for the Chargers. Alex, you got any hot takes for next week?
I don't know if I really have any hot takes. I have a prop bet, which we'll get to later to hit on. But I guess my hot takes, I could see Slater going before Sewell, and I could see also Horn going before Surtain. I don't know if those are really hot takes, but I think that's kind of counterintuitive to what people have been saying about all of those prospects. Ooh, one hot take I have is I think Kellen Mond is going to be at the back of the first round somewhere.
There we go.
That's
we did just do our I just finalized my big boards and stuff like that, and I expanded it to 100. And I actually have the same exact grade on Mond as I do on Mac Jones. So, I don't necessarily understand, like we've said a bunch of times, right? But I think Kellen Mond is super interesting as an NFL prospect, and I could definitely see him sneaking into the first round. I could see a team, like Washington, maybe, a lot of people have kind of pegged them as a team who's going to trade up. I could see them trading down and then targeting Mond, in kind of like the late 20s area. So I don't hate that as well. I guess like the one prospect, like everybody kind of knows my love for Elijah Vera Tucker, but I think the bet when we look back at this interior offensive line class in a few years, I think we're going to look back at Creed Humphrey as the best interior offensive lineman from this class. I think he's one of the biggest no-brainers. There's been a lot of talk of the Steelers taking a running back at 24. I think they should just take Creed Humphrey to replace Marquise Pouncey. So I'm a big fan of Creed Humphrey, and I think he's one of the players that, like, if I had to bet on a non-top 20 prospect becoming a perennial Pro Bowler, it would be Creed Humphrey. So I guess that's kind of a hot take. James Chard says said his hot take is that Azeez Ojulari is the first edge taken. I kind of agree with that. I think that would make a lot of sense too.
I have no idea who the first edge taken is going to be. It's so interesting with him and Phillips, and then you have a guy maybe like Rousseau towards the end of the first round. I feel like there's a lot of uncertainty about who that first guy will be.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in terms of the Chargers, like my hot take there, I've said this a couple times, but I think that they're going to take a safety prospect sooner rather than later. I think a lot of people have kind of pegged that pick number 97 or the fourth round as a safety potential target. I think it's going to be in the second or third round because the Brandon Staley defense requires 3 high-level safeties to play, at an effective level. So I think that they're going to take a safety sooner rather than later.
If I had to come up with another draft hot take in terms of position, you know what? They take a quarterback in the 6th round, and they're going to have a 3 quarterback competition for one spot with, I don't know, Chase Daniel, Easton Stick. I don't know. I'm just kidding, but that'd be kind of funny.
Well, they have been meeting with a lot of these, late round quarterbacks. So
oh yeah, they actually have.
They've got 9 picks. They can afford to take one, and I personally assume that Chase Daniel is going to be number 2 on the depth chart. But I think bringing in some competition for Easton Stick, I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm not necessarily saying that they should give up on him, but I think you can never have enough competition. And, they did the same thing with Easton Stick and Cardell Jones, and then they chose Stick. So that would make a lot of sense to me. All right. The next question is the prop bet question from Trevor Black. Can you each give us your number 1 surefire favorite NFL draft oh my gosh, I can't talk. Draft prop bet, that was hard, that you would each bet the house with. So you can take that one first, Alex.
I think Patriots trade up to 7 or 8 to get their quarterback. If I had to bet the house on one, I just get a lot of vibes from them. And there was that comment Bill Belichick had the other week about trading up. I feel like if a Fields or a Lance is there, or even if Jones is there, I feel like they will probably take one.
Is that a Miami Heat shirt? I assume that is a Miami Heat shirt.
It's a Miami Vice shirt. I do not like the Heat. In fact, I hate the Heat. But the Vice shirt is kind of fun, so I have that one.
There we go. I wasn't sure if you were like rooting for them to win tonight because of the Sixers.
Absolutely not.
Okay. Yeah, I think the prop bet that I'm most interested in betting on, I mentioned it a little earlier. It's Najee Harris. He's selected right now. The over-under, I think, is 31.5. I would hammer that over because I think the Steelers would take him. I think, we could definitely see him be a first-round pick. And, we kind of talked about him the other day, how just awesome he is. It's been a long time since we haven't seen a running back in the first round. So I think Najee Harris is definitely going to go in the first round. Brady Wooten, what's a surprise pick in rounds 2 through 4 the Chargers could make that nobody is talking about? And what is one hot take regarding the first round, i.e. a certain player falling? Or, well, we kind of did that question already, but this is specifically a hot take about someone falling or going earlier than expected. So I think a surprise pick in rounds 2 through 4, I mentioned the safety pick. There's been a lot of love for Peyton Turner lately. I think we could see him go way earlier. And I kind of hate that because there's 40 players about, every so-and-so player is going to go earlier. Right. And so I think the Chargers could realistically be looking at Peyton Turner at 47. And everybody kind of loves Uchenna Nwosu, and I'm really excited to see what he can do. But I think that's the surprise, that they kind of potentially pass on a corner or a safety and take an edge rusher at 47. And I think Peyton Turner would be that guy.
It could be Peyton Turner. I wouldn't be surprised. For me, it's just in general like the sleepers. And there's a couple interesting wide receivers. Felton from UCLA. I could see the Chargers taking him a little bit earlier. I think they met with Anthony Schwartz. I wouldn't be shocked if that was the case. So like around 3 or 4 receiver, maybe. I wouldn't be shocked if they took one a little bit early.
Riley asked, do I think Javonte goes over Travis Etienne? I think he should. I think Javonte Williams is a much better running back prospect than Travis Etienne. I don't know if Alex disagrees or agrees with that, but I do think Javonte Williams should go over Travis Etienne.
I think they're kind of the same tier for me. It depends kind of on what you want. I think if you want that like really, kind of bursty athleticism, then maybe Etienne. And if you want that kind of guy that's going to break tackles and go crazy, then maybe Javonte. Kind of depends on what offense you're running. So I have no problems with either of them. I mean, not to the Chargers because you have to take them in the first or second round.
Yeah.
But for teams taking them in that range, I think you could take either one.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in general terms, like I was kind of having this conversation today with Marcus Whitman. This receiver class, I think it is being a little overhyped. I think there are a lot of very interesting targets. But the problem is that this is a very heavily slot receiver group. Like there's a lot of, slot backs or, gadget players. There aren't a ton of true like outside number one receivers. And so because of that, I feel like Terrace Marshall could go a lot earlier than expected. I think a lot of people have kind of pegged Rashad Bateman as that fourth receiver, but even he is a little more slot receiver. I think he can obviously play outside. But I think someone could look at Terrace Marshall and be like, you know what, we love this length, we love this speed, we love the height, we love the diverse portfolio that he brings to the table. So I think Terrace Marshall is really like one of the few players that I will be like, yeah, I think he's going to go earlier than people think.
Yeah, Terrace Marshall is great. I think I have him as my wide receiver 5 or 6, somewhere in there. I really like his size and just, how he physically is. He's kind of like if people slept on Jamar Chase and, you take him in that range, like he's kind of that version or the cheap version of Jamar Chase, which isn't a bad thing because Jamar Chase is very good.
So good.
I would kind of take Terrace Marshall, like, if the Eagles wanted to do, Surtain at 12 and then they want to go grab, Terrace Marshall at the beginning or, at the end of the first round, I wouldn't hate that.
There we go. I think that would be a good scenario for the Eagles. So friendly reminder for those of you that have recently joined us, we do have the super chat feature enabled. So if you want to make sure that we do get to your question, because obviously we would love to get to every single question, but we're not going to be able to. So if you want to make sure that we get to your question, definitely hit us up on the super chat feature. All right, we've got 2 more questions on Patreon, and then we'll get to some of these YouTube ones. Jack Andrew Hunter says, trade up talk aside, who would you think could be potential trade down partners, and who would you pick at any trade down spots? So I think the obvious ones, right? Like Alex mentioned, the Patriots. I don't know if they'd be inclined to trade up 2 spots to get a quarterback if Mac Jones falls. That's the scenario that has to happen, right? Is that Mac Jones or Trey Lance has to fall. And so then you're looking at Washington, maybe Chicago. I would guess I wouldn't be surprised if a team like Pittsburgh like traded up to go get their guy, or a receiver needy team, if Jalen Waddle's on the board. So I think the trade down scenarios really depend on the quarterback, because that's kind of the scenario that has to happen in terms of a top 15 team trading down. But the obvious ones, I think, Washington, Chicago, New England. I don't know if you had any other thoughts on that one too.
Yeah, I mean, I just kind of don't think it's realistic that they're going to trade down. If anything, I would say it's more likely they trade up than they trade down. We saw the Benjamin Albright tweet about trading up for Penei Sewell. But aside from that, like, there are trade down spots, but like, I just don't think all the quarterbacks are going to last till the Chargers. Mac Jones could theoretically fall, but there's also talk about the Niners taking him at 3, and that may very well end up being a real thing. I have no idea, based on all the media back and forth on that. And then if you have Fields and Lance, then I think both of those guys are going to go top 10, whether, a team like Denver takes them or a team trades up. So I kind of think that all the quarterbacks are going to be gone before like 10. And, people have brought up scenarios where all 5 of them go in the top 5 or all 4 of them go in the top 4. Like, I think that's kind of the scenario that's going to happen. So, like, I guess but what's like, yeah, if all the quarterbacks are gone and like I just said, I think New England's going to trade up, then I don't think there's really a point to trading down. Like, I mean, it would be interesting to see the Chargers trade down just because of getting more value and getting more picks. But like, I don't see a realistic team because I feel like Chicago or Washington has to get up a lot higher than the Chargers. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's a tough one to peg. And Tom Telesco, he was having a conversation with Chris Harry for, I think it was just a news report or something like that. And he shared this story about them targeting Dwight Freeney when he was in Indianapolis. And he kind of shared, his philosophy that one of the philosophies that he's kind of inherited from Bill Polian is like, if we have a guy we love at, the specific Dwight Freeney one was at 11, in this case 13, and they're kind of projected at the 17, 18, 19 range. What's the difference? Like, we're just going to take our guy at 13. And most teams generally share that kind of philosophy. Like, you take your guy, if you love a person that's on the board, you take them regardless of where you want to take them, right? Because you never know. Say the Chargers are targeting Christian Darrisaw or Elijah Vera Tucker or Tevin Jenkins, and they trade down to 20, and then all 3 of those players go off the board before they pick. So I think that's kind of why we haven't seen Tom Telesco ever trade down. We've seen him trade up a few times, but we've never seen him trade down, and I think that's kind of why.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting. I really don't think, if you're going to take Christian Darrisaw at 17 through a trade down, what's the point of not taking him at 13? Like, I just, you get like an extra, I don't know, 4th round pick. Like, I mean, it would be nice, but I don't think anyone is giving you a high pick for trading up if it's not for a quarterback. So that's, and that gets into the whole like trade up for Penei Sewell thing. I just don't think, I don't think there's a whole lot of value in trading down, or not as much as people think at 13 where the Chargers are.
Yeah, I think if you look at teams who have a strong record of trading down, it's generally teams who are picking in like the 20s. So, like Indianapolis has a strong history of it. New Orleans does it a lot. Baltimore does it a lot. And it's because teams, New England did it last year. It's these teams who are in the 20s who, once the quarterbacks go off the board, then people are trying to get wide receivers or offensive tackles or whatever the case may be. The Chargers getting Kenneth Murray. So I think it'd be different if the Chargers were picking more frequently in the 20s. But, at 13, you're in a position to get your guy, whoever that guy is, generally speaking. All right, last question here. And then, again, we'll get to the YouTube questions, talk about Penei Sewell and all that. This is from John Ayers, a.k.a. Sucktails, on our Patreon page. He says, I think round 2-3 is a sweet spot for corner. Assuming they go offensive line at 13, I know it's a gamble to wait to see who falls, but if the Chargers see an edge or a safety and take him at 47, what corner do you think realistically falls to 77 that would fit what they're looking for? I prefer they get the best available corner at 47, but you never know with Tom Telesco and how Staley will value certain guys. So specifically, right, this is the Chargers take an offensive lineman at 13, potentially take a safety or an edge, which I think is in play at 47. And then what corner could be there at 77? One of my favorite players in this class is Paulson Adebo. He's one of my guys. I think he would be a perfect fit for the Chargers take. I think realistically he could be there, right? Because a lot of people have, kind of soured on him because he had a down season in 2019. He opted out. So there's, a little more perceived risk there. But I do also think that a team could take him in the second round because the cornerback position in general, it's such a valuable position, and there isn't a ton of supply, right? The demand is high, the supply is low, and so we could see a run on corners in the second round that pushes everybody else up, right? Like we could potentially see Asante Samuel Jr., Eric Stokes, Ifeatu Melifonwu, all go before the Chargers pick at 47, and then later in the second round, same kind of thing with Paulson Adebo and all these other ones. Aaron Robinson is another one. But the other one that's kind of weird for me is Tyson Campbell, the other cornerback from Georgia. I've seen some people say that, people think he's a first round talent, that he could potentially go, super high, maybe be like the 5th corner off the board. And then I've also seen like people have him in the third, fourth round. So I think that one it could definitely be in play at 77, but I feel a little more confident in Paulson Adebo being there at 77 than I do Tyson Campbell.
Yeah, I think you're looking at maybe like Ifeatu Melifonwu or, potentially Tyson Campbell. I think those are probably the types of guys that you're looking at in the third round. As far as the second round, I think it's going to be interesting because it seems like they're going to go offensive tackle at 13 now. But we'll see how reliable all that stuff ends up being.
Yeah.
I think they'll take a defender in the second round. I don't know if I would guarantee the position. Especially if you kind of have like really good value in the second round. Like there's been some situations where Gregory Rosso like falls into the second round or something. I think it'll be interesting. And the second round is also a really good trade up spot because they have that extra third round pick. So I wouldn't be surprised if they traded up earlier in that round either, whether it's, to the Jaguars at that high or even like the early 40s. I really wouldn't be surprised if they did that. So I think they'll take sort of best available defender or in the 47th pick, whether that's safety or whether that's corner edge.
Craig, I love it, man. He says Horn is CB1, Alex. Nothing skewed about it.
Craig, you're not going to change my mind. All right. So Tan is cornerback 1, and I will die on this hill. And when he's a 10-time perennial Pro Bowler, and we consider him the best cornerback of all time over Deion Sanders, then
there's the hot take, man. There's the hot take.
I'm just kidding. But I look, Horn is very good, but I just personally prefer Surtain. But I wouldn't be mad with either of them at 13. It's it would be great to get either.
Man, what is going on over there? You got all kinds of.
I don't know. They all just pass by my house. I don't know what.
It's all good, man. All good. So yeah, I think that another kind of option for the Chargers in terms of the cornerback class, could be Benjamin St-Juste later on, or an Ambry Thomas or Darius Williams, Keith Taylor. But I think those are kind of guys that you could get in the 4th or 5th round. So. It's going to be very interesting how kind of one of the things that Tyler talked about in his mock draft with Penei Sewell is that, Brandon Staley, at least on the Rams last year, they didn't have a ton of, top premier capital draft picks on defense, right? Terrell Burgess was in the 3rd round, and that was kind of it. Everybody else was kind of 5th, 6th, 7th round. So going to be interesting there. So let's talk about the Penei Sewell thing, because obviously Tyler is like very in favor of it. I think, he said last night, he was like, fuck it. Like Justin Herbert deserves it. Alex is kind of against it. I'm kind of in the middle. Obviously I love Penei Sewell. I think he is, a generational offensive tackle. But Alex, I'll let you kind of, give your spiel here about why you think the Chargers should not take Penei or not trade up to get Penei Sewell.
Also, I want to clarify, it's not that I don't think the Chargers should trade up for Penei Sewell. It's really that I just don't think they should trade up to 7 or 6 in general. Whether the player is Sewell, Slater, Surtain, you can make up any situation. I just don't think they should do it. And Tyler is he's like a kid when, trying to get to the cookie jar, and I have to be the adult in the room that tells him that you can't have the cookies, right? But for me, look, I love Penei Sewell, and ultimately, if they did it, am I really going to be mad? No, because you got Penei Sewell, and he's your, fortified left tackle. If that happens live on stream, I think we'll all be relatively happy. But for me, I just think it's tough for me to just buy it, because it's you probably have to give up a future first, and I don't know if I want to do that next year. I know a lot of people are going to be like, oh, it doesn't matter because they'll be picking at 28 next year after they get to the AFC Championship. I'm like, okay, let's slow down. They have to get to the playoffs first. So I just don't think it's very responsible in terms of roster building to not to go all in when the team isn't ready to go all in. That's just sort of my thing with it. And I think a lot of you guys sleep on Christian Darrisaw or Tevin Jenkins, whoever it is. To me, this is another thing. I don't believe that Penei Sewell is worth 4 picks plus, the 13th, or 3 picks plus the 13th. That's just my opinion. I really love Penei Sewell. And if Penei Sewell, look, If he falls to like 10, because you can't trade up to 9 because it's the Broncos. If he falls to 10, do it. Like in that case, you're not going to have to give up a first round pick because, you know, the value just isn't there trading up to 10 with the Cowboys. But for me, 6 and 7 are just a little bit too far in terms of the value.
Yeah, I think when you're talking about trading up for Penei Sewell, like the first thing that has to happen is that the 5 quarterbacks have to go in the top 6.
Right.
Cincinnati's not trading down. They like refuse to trade down.
Well,
like they're gonna.
Well, this gets to another point, which is me and Steven have had this war.
Yeah.
About who goes at 5 to Cincinnati, and it's looking like I'm going to be right. And I will declare victory over Steven on draft night when Cincinnati selects Jamar Chase.
Like it absolutely is in play, and I've always said that, but I'm just saying like it's not, you know, a home run yet that it's going to be Chase. But anyway, like okay, obviously the first thing that has to happen for Penei Sewell is that the Bengals do not take him. The other thing is that the quarterbacks have to go, you know, in the top 6, right? Because obviously that would mean that Miami trades down. The tough thing for the Chargers, if they're going to trade it for Penei Sewell, is if you have to get at 7, I think. Because I think the Panthers at 8, if Penei Sewell is there, they're taking him. Like that's a guarantee in my opinion. So to me, like you have to have the quarterbacks go in the top 5, top 6. And so if they're sitting there and Mac Jones or Trey Lance is on the board at 7, like you just said, like with New England, if New England is going after a quarterback, they're going to be able to offer more than the Chargers are going to be able to offer, because they're going after a quarterback. Chargers are potentially going after an offensive tackle. And that becomes a bidding war, and that's a situation where I think the Chargers should not get involved in. I think if you can trade up for Penei Sewell and keep next year's first-round pick, I think that could make some sense, depending on, you know, what exactly you're giving up. But if it gets to the point where they have to include, you know, next year's first, I don't think that is a scenario that I'm okay with, because, you know, like hypothetically speaking, right, you know, you have the chance to take Christian Darrisaw at 13, and then let's say, you know, you're picking at 16, 17 next year, you know, that's 2 top 20 picks. And I love Penei Sewell, but I think I would rather have the 2 top 20 picks over the next 2 years than just Penei Sewell. So that's my kind of thing, is if it involves next year's first, I don't think they should do it.
So the other thing for this is like free agency next year, because Chris Harris is a free agent, Linval Joseph is a free agent, Mike Williams is a free agent, assuming they don't reach an extension, and Derwin James, you have to decide whether his option is getting picked up. And I think they ultimately will pick up his option, but it's got to be an expensive option because it's a first round option, as we're seeing with Mike Williams right now. So I just think in terms of roster building, like all the holes that you're going to need to fill in next year's draft, I don't know if I'm comfortable with Tom Telesco not picking until 50, you know, to fill, you know, 4, 5, 6 holes, you know, like, and that's just my thing. And I know, again, I want to make it clear, like, I'm not anti Penei Sewell in any way. So it's, or anti-Oregon or anti-Herbert, whatever. I just think, you know, for me, I'd rather just take Darrisaw or take someone and keep the picks, right? Like that's just my thing when it comes to draft capital. And I know there is a significant difference in the prospects. You know, I have Christian Darrisaw as my 12th grader prospect and Penei is my 4th. But like, to me, that's not a big enough difference to do to make me, you know, really consider doing that trade if the case is that you have to give up your first round pick, which I think it would be based on the Eagles-Dolphins trade that we saw, based on the run on quarterbacks. But we'll see. Look, if Penei Sewell is still, you know, if Tom Telesco, I'll make my profile picture that stupid, you know, the Thug Telesco meme. If he can figure out how to trade up to 6 or 7 without giving up a first, then yes, sure, I'll be all for it. And I'll make an altar to him. But I just don't think that's going to happen. So, but if Penei Sewell falls to 10, look, in that case, I would be all for trading him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm kind of right there with you. So, love Penei Sewell. Think he's going to be a generational offensive tackle. If the Chargers can get him at a decently fair price, then I'm definitely all for it. So, all right, guys, we're going to open it up to the chat. Like I said, you know, if you want to make sure we answer your question, make sure and use the super chat feature. Otherwise, I'll just kind of scroll through it and get to some questions. A couple of people have asked about Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. First of all, if you've listened to our podcast already, I have him as a safety. I don't think he's going to be a pure linebacker. So I think that's kind of the difference between him and Micah Parsons in terms of positional value. Obviously, if you have followed me on Twitter, I think that Micah Parsons is a piece of shit human being. And so the Chargers are not going to take him. But I think Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, there is a world in which the Chargers take him at 13 because I think he is a safety. I don't think he's a linebacker. And I think the Chargers will be able to use him in a variety of ways. I think PFF tweeted this out. He had the highest cover grade in the slot of any player in the draft. Like that includes actual slot cornerbacks. So you can take Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, play him as a big nickel. You can play him as a safety. You can play him as a dime linebacker. So I do think there is a world in which the Chargers consider Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. It's just a lot of other things would have to happen, right? Sewell, Slater off the board, Surtain, Horn off the board. And I think you're looking at Owusu-Koramoah and Darisaw, and like maybe that's kind of a debate. I don't really think it should be. Yeah. I would take Darisaw in that situation, and I'm not the biggest Darisaw guy. But I do think that they would at least consider taking Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah.
I think they'd consider it and then say no. It's not anything against JOK either. I'm just like, I know the whole linebacker safety thing, but you did just take a linebacker last year in the first round. And I think that if you're going to spend another first round pick, it just doesn't seem like this would be the year to do it. I tend to think if they're faced in the situation where there's no Surtain, no Horn, no Slater, no Sewell, that they're going to take Christian Darisaw. I think that'll be the pick. So, and look, we've been saying OT or bust, and now you guys are like, oh, JOK at 13. What about that? I've heard a lot of people kind of under that same sentiment. Like, I think there's a chance that they go for Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, like a percentage chance that you could create, like I don't know, 5%, or you could create one of the Alabama wide receivers we talked about, Smith and Waddle and all that. But to me, I think the first round pick is clearly going to be cornerback or offensive tackle.
Yeah. So Anthony Tran asks, if Chargers go with an edge rusher in the second round, do you think they would target Peyton Turner, Carlos Basham, or Ronnie Perkins?
If they go with edge in the second round, I guess Basham makes the most sense. I don't know. I'm not super passionate about the second round edges, but I think they'll just take kind of whatever the best value is there. So I don't know. What do you think on that one?
Well, I think, the Chargers have, Joey Bosa, who's kind of like their power edge player. They have Jerry Tillery, who they are very high on, or at least Brandon Staley is. So to me, they're kind of looking for like that Leonard Floyd, Von Miller kind of profile. And so that to me is Peyton Turner. It's Joe Tryon if he's there. Again, he's another player that has been given the he's going to go earlier than you think tag. So I think it would be kind of a longer, more athletic player. I think Ellerson Smith in the later rounds would make a lot of sense as well. Somebody who Alex is pretty high on it. He was his edge sleeper. But if it's the second round, and if I'm choosing between those three players, I think it would be Peyton Turner because, again, he fits more of the Leonard Floyd, Von Miller physical profile. As much as I personally love Carlos Basham, I think they already have their version of Basham and Joey Bosa because Basham is more of a physical power rusher. So I think they would be Peyton Turner of that group.
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible. I'll just be curious to see where they take edge because I don't know. Some people, Ryan's saying, edge taken late day 3. I don't know where they're going to take one. It could be, they just trust Nwosu more, or it could be they really, value having some depth there. So I think it'll be, I don't know, either the last third round pick or the first one on day 3, maybe for an edge. But I could also see it being late day 3 and they take, I don't know, Tommy Tremble because he's from Notre Dame.
Right. Jorge said, dang, anti-Sewell, anti-Horn, and anti-Joke. I don't think Alex is against any of those players.
Well, I'm very pro
prefers other options. Yeah, very pro Surtain. Where do you think Surtain ends up going? Like, do you think he's a surefire Dallas Cowboy, or what? Like, what's in your head in terms of where Surtain goes?
I don't know. There's been a whole debate in the Cowboys community. I have a friend that's a Cowboys fan, and he's saying there's this whole debate about Surtain or Horn for the Cowboys, like we've had for Surtain or Horn for the Chargers.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised about that. I'm kind of uncertain about what the Cowboys are going to do. I know a lot of people have pegged Surtain to them, but I'm not like certain. And then there was the talk about them trading up for Kyle Pitts potentially, and then you have Jerry Jones, who like always wants to go offense regardless of what they need. So, like, if you put a Jalen Waddle there, is he absolutely going to say no to that? I don't know, because he took a wide receiver when the team had crippling other needs last year. So I don't know. If I had to guess, I think Surtain winds up in the Dallas pick or he winds up in Philly. I think those are the two that make the most sense. But yeah, one of my bold predictions is that Horn could go before. So I don't know.
So you think that if Horn or Surtain are on the board for the Eagles would take them?
Well, it kind of depends. I think the Eagles would certainly consider it, but it could also be Smith or Waddle on the board. So especially Waddle, because I think the Giants are going to take Smith personally. So if you have Waddle there, I think that would be hard for the Eagles to pass up on, just because of how much better he could make that offense, with Rager, and it immediately increases your depth and, gives Hurts a weapon. So yeah. I think it'll be wide receiver or cornerback for them, and then I don't know, Howie Roseman will probably fuck it up and draft Kwity Paye.
Oh man, that's going to be a lot of fun to watch. So Max Roque, speaking of the Alabama receivers, he says, which of the Alabama receivers do you think is the better fit for the Chargers? Just in terms of prospects and skill set, I think is kind of where that's going. I personally tend to think it would be Devontae Smith. I know a lot of people really like Jalen Waddle and what he can do, but to me, I think the Chargers need somebody who can fill a variety of roles as a route runner, as a deep threat, as a yards after catch player. And to me, that's Devontae Smith. I know a lot of people are making a huge deal about his 166-pound frame, which is kind of ridiculous, but at the same time, I don't think it matters. So for me, I think it's Smith, but I would totally understand and respect anyone who thinks it's Waddle.
Yeah, I think it could be either of them. I would probably lean towards Waddle, I guess, specifically for this offense, and the fact that you kind of want high speed, with the fact that, Keenan and Mike Williams are pretty slow players, and, a lot of Keenan is built in possession receiving. Mike is kind of the jump ball archetype, right? So I think Waddle would probably make the most sense for them if they were to go wide receiver. Devonta Smith would be super interesting, though. I mean, not that they should take Devonta Smith, but it would be interesting to see him next to Keenan Allen and running routes with him. That'd be really fun.
Yeah. Mr. Kicks 21 says, wants to know, how does Joe Reed compare to these shiftier wide receivers in the draft? Also, does Javon Holland remind you of John Johnson? So Joe Reed question first, Javon Holland second.
I mean, I think Joe Reed has a bit more of a limited route tree compared to some of these other guys that you can find in later rounds. I also don't think he's quite as fast, but he does contribute on special teams. And, I think he'll eventually get up to speed on, NFL route tree and stuff like that. I would probably say instead of last year, he went in the 5th round. He would probably go in like the 6th or 7th in this draft, just because of how deep I think wide receiver is. But I still think Joe Reed is going to be pretty good. Yeah,
there are so many players of his archetype in this class. You have Amari Rodgers, Daz Newsome, you have all the Jalen Darden, you have all these players who fit that kind of role of, a little shorter, stockier, Ben Fennell calls him a slot back, that you do, a lot of jet sweeps. You can put him in the backfield kind of thing. I still think that they can get some value out of Joe Reed. I'm not super interested in drafting like another version of him. But I agree. I think just because of his limited route tree that he probably would get pushed down the board this year. But I still really like him. As for Javon Holland, the John Johnson comparison is interesting. I'm going to have to look more into that. Obviously I've watched a lot of John Johnson just from watching what the Rams were doing last year, but I like Javon Holland a lot. I don't know if he is I don't know, man. I'm a little tricky on Javon Holland and where to land with him, because he played so heavily in the slot last year. So I'm going to have to get back to you, Mr. Kicks, on that one. But I think it's a very interesting comparison.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting comparison for Javon Holland. I don't know. For me, John Johnson is the more complete safety, and maybe John Johnson, yeah, is the more complete safety. Javon Holland maybe develops into that, but I think it's going to kind of take a while because he's played, so much on the slot. But he could definitely develop into that at the NFL in some, simulations.
Yeah. All right, let's get to James Chard's question because he was one of the first that asked this. Christian Darrisaw over Tevin Jenkins. I personally have it the other way. So, Alex, I'll let you make your argument for Christian Darrisaw over Tevin Jenkins.
I think Christian Darrisaw is really solid in the run game, obviously, and he still puts in that effort. I know people are going to say he's like not a finisher, but I think that he's been really clean as a player. I think he allowed 6 pressures on 300 snaps and 0 sacks last year. I mean, he's just a really solid player. I mean, I don't think he is Penei Sewell, and I do have Tevin Jenkins a little bit lower on my board. I feel like when people watch Tevin Jenkins on that film, he's a bit of an angrier player, and obviously he is that finisher type. But to me, I feel like Darrisaw is a bit more efficient. That's kind of how I would sell it, and that's not sexy by any means, and that's maybe not what people want to watch of an O-lineman on tape. But I think either of them would be fine picks, to be perfectly honest. I don't really have a passionate take about why either one is better. I just think Chargers fans sleep on Christian Darrisaw, calling him average and stuff like that. I'm like, we're talking about a first-round prospect here. So when people were calling him average the other day when I suggested they should take him at 13, I was just like, all right, guys.
Yeah, I think the narratives surrounding Christian Darrisaw have gotten really out of hand, and I've kind of talked about that on my Twitter page and our big board episode. To me, it all comes down to personal preference because to me, Jenkins, like you said, he's a much more aggressive, physical tackle, right? Like he wants to attack every rep and try and get you into the dirt. And if that's your kind of offensive lineman, which it happens to be mine, then I think Jenkins over Darrisaw makes a lot of sense. I think for the Chargers specifically, I would understand taking Christian Darrisaw because he fits the profile he fits it to a T of what Brandon Staley seems to want. And he is a more smooth, naturally athletic player. You see these plays on tape where he's running, 40 yards downfield, step for step with Khalil Herbert and making blocks. That's like the kind of the difference, right? I think Darrisaw is the better, smoother athlete than Tevin Jenkins is. But if you just want someone to come in and be a bully, set the tone of your offensive line, then absolutely take Tevin Jenkins. I think, we're going to see Tevin Jenkins potentially go to the Raiders. I think that makes a lot of sense. He fits their profile, but they also need a ton of help on defense. I think the absolute floor for Tevin Jenkins is Indianapolis, because I think you take Tevin Jenkins, put him next to Quentin Nelson, and you have the most physically imposing left side imaginable. So I think that makes a lot of sense for them. But I prefer Jenkins overall as a prospect. I think the Chargers would prefer Christian Darrisaw just because of how smooth of an athlete he is.
And Anthony Tran gave us a little super chat, so we give him some love. $5 holla. Slater or Darrisaw at 13. Staley values arm length at OT and edge. Darrisaw has the longest arms in this draft. Body comp, Trent Williams. I think that if they were both there at 13, I feel like for me,
that's so tough.
So Slater is the better player. I would probably take Slater. The Chargers, I don't know, because if you're talking like just strictly BPA kind of stuff, then I think you would take Slater. But in terms of like fit and what they want in length, then I think it would probably be Christian Darrisaw there. I don't think that Slater will be there at 13, but I think Carolina will probably actually take Slater if they don't trade down. But it's an interesting question because I do think Slater would be the best tackle prospect there. But who would you say is the best fit? Probably Darrisaw. I don't know.
Well, that's a floor versus ceiling conversation for
Yeah,
me,
exactly.
because Rashawn Slater, like unequivocally, as a day one tackle, he's better than Christian Darrisaw. Like he would come in,
Right.
provide a very stabling force for the Chargers. But at the same time, like there is some concern around the league from what I've seen from other or from other draft analysts, about eventually down the road Slater kicking into guard, maybe even center. So for the Chargers, like I could understand a scenario where Slater and Darrisaw are on the board and they take Darrisaw because they view him as a higher ceiling left tackle prospect. Like there's no doubt in my mind that Christian Darrisaw is a left tackle and he's going to be a left tackle for 10, 12 years in the NFL. But like I can see a world where a team takes Slater, plays him at tackle for the first year, and then kicks him inside, because I think the issue with length is a little overstated sometimes, but eventually it does become an issue. Even a guy like Joe Thomas, who had shorter arms, like it did become an issue at certain points of the season. And so I don't know, man. That's such a tough situation for me, because I think Slater unequivocally is the better player right now. But if you're talking like pure left tackle prospects, I think Darrisaw does have the higher ceiling over Slater.
Yeah, I could go either way on that one. I think Darrisaw definitely is the sort of higher ceiling left tackle guy. The only thing I would say is kind of what I said about Slater is just like the Chargers have so many spots to fill in this offensive line. That was kind of the thinking at one point, prior to signing Lindsley, prior to signing Balaga, was, they had all these holes to fill, but now the interior is kind of full. Because they do have Ibushi and they do have Lindsley and all these guys. So I feel like in that situation, they would probably go Darrisaw just because I think he is the pure left tackle prospect. But part of me, even if they do take Darrisaw, would be like, well, I kind of think Slater's going to be better, but I don't know. So yeah. I would feel mixed on it.
Yeah, there is definitely some value for taking Slater. And even if he turns out as a guard, like, I don't really care. Like it's a very similar argument for why I wanted Elijah Vera Tucker for a very long time. And I still kind of do, because even if you take him at guard or you play him at tackle year one and it doesn't work out, like he's not an elite level player, then you move him into guard and he's still an elite player there. And the Chargers, frankly, like they just need a gamer. They need someone to come in and be a long-term asset on the offensive line. And if that turns out that it's a guard in the first round, then I'm okay with it. I would obviously like them to be able to get a long-term left tackle, but if whoever they take ends up at guard, I think that is fine. Okay, so there was a question. Theodore Duenes, I'm gonna guess that's how you say that. He says, do you think the Chargers draft a running back to replace Joshua Kelly? I think they could take a running back, but not to replace Joshua Kelly, to replace Justin Jackson. Because I think Justin Jackson, the issue there is that he never gets on the field. Like he just struggles with injuries, right? And so I think they need someone to kind of do that sort of skill set. We heard from a bunch of beat reporters that Joshua Kelly was the best player in training camp. And so I think he'll eventually bounce back. I have a tough time like guaranteeing it, like putting my name behind it. But I think last year was clearly a confidence issue. And if the new coaching staff can be able to build that back up, I think Joshua Kelly could be a fine player for them. I still hate the draft pick because they should have taken an offensive lineman, or
Ben Barch.
Ben Barch, whoever was on the board, they could have taken even a corner like Troy Pride.
Oh man,
Troy Pride or
I was so mad when they did. I was so mad when they didn't take Troy Pride.
So I think Joshua Kelly is going to be a fine player for them. But I think if they draft a running back, it's going to be a Justin Jackson type of player.
I could see that 6th or 7th round. Everyone knows that I love Khalil Herbert and want to take him in the 6th or 7th round if he's there, potentially the 5th round. But I think they could draft a running back later on. It'll be interesting to see how the coaching staff values Joshua Kelly, because Joshua Kelly was primarily kind of like an Anthony Lynn pick, low key. So I'll be curious to see what are Brandon Staley's thoughts on him. What are Frank Smith is the running backs coach, right? Who's the running backs coach? Or
no, the running backs coach is the guy from Iowa.
Okay, run game coordinator, something.
Run game coordinator is Frank Smith, yeah.
Right, yeah. So it'll be interesting to see how the Staley staff values Joshua Kelly. How do they value, Justin Jackson? I think the problem with Justin Jackson is he's not going to be back after this year, probably. I think this is the last year on his deal. So it'll be interesting to see what they do with him. I could definitely see him potentially getting cut in training camp. I could definitely see Joshua Kelly theoretically being cut because neither of them produces a significant dead cap hit at all. So I could definitely see them bringing in a running back for competition on both of them, really.
Yeah. Okay, so James Chard and a couple other people, Trevor Black, asking about Samuel Cosmi. Why has he fallen so far? Listen, I've been on the Samuel Cosmi train for a while. We saw the way that he tested. I think he has the second highest upside in this class because of his athleticism, because of his size, because of his length. The problem with Samuel Cosmi is that whoever the offensive line coach at Texas was the worst coach possible. Like, Samuel Cosmi's technique is so bad. And you see him struggle with leverage. You see him struggle being overzealous. You see him struggle with all these different things. And so that's really why he's fallen so far. Like, whoever takes him is going to have to rework his technique at a very big level. So that's kind of why.
Yeah, I think I don't know if he is going to be a second round pick. It's going to be interesting because I think some team is probably just going to value his physical traits a lot.
Yeah.
And then, we have no idea. There's been a lot of disagreements about the offensive tackle class per reports among like all the franchises. So
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, he may be a second round pick and he might have fallen, but I have no idea if that's actually the case. Right. I wouldn't be surprised if he was like in the 20s, and I wouldn't be surprised if he was in the 40s. Like, there's such volatility in the offensive tackle class right now.
I mean, we saw Isaiah Wilson go way earlier than anybody thought was possible, right, just because of his physical profile fit what the Titans wanted at that position. So that's really all it comes down to. He could still be a first-round pick. It just
not sure Isaiah Wilson worked out in retrospect.
No, obviously not. But I'm just saying, like, that's the kind of profile the Titans wanted. And so Anthony Tran, shout out to him, another $5 one. He wants us to rank the order of who is the biggest Charger fan among the three of us. So Alex is third because of his Eagles fandom.
You know what? I would probably rank myself third because I'm from Philadelphia. I wasn't born in California, so that's a point against me. And you know what? I'll rank Tyler number one. No offense to you, Steven.
I would agree with that.
I think Tyler is the number one diehard Chargers fan. I think Steven would then be number two. And then I'm probably number three because I was born on the complete other side of the country. But I still love the Chargers. I still do. You don't say I don't love the Chargers because I've watched too many of these games for you to say that I don't like the Chargers.
No, absolutely. I personally don't. I could never root for a second team, but I don't fault anyone who chooses to do that. Everyone can be a fan in their own way, and I think that's kind of really the only stance that we should have. Tyler's the only season ticket holder, so he gets to be number one because he's the season ticket holder.
Well, I don't got the money for season tickets. I would have to fly back and forth across the country every week.
I could make it work, but it's like a 4-hour drive for me from Fresno, California to the stadium, and flights are even more expensive. So that really is the only reason why I'm not, because I think it'll be a really fun experience. I'll do it eventually. I'll do it for 1 year, but not anytime soon. Let's see here. Arjun, what's up, man? Make sure and check out Arjun's analytical video. If you haven't already, that's on our YouTube channel. Great video for him, and I can't wait to see what he does going forward for our channel. Couple people asking about Devontae Adams. Listen, if the Chargers can get Devontae Adams next year, 100%, I don't care what it costs, go do it. That would be the best receiver tandem in the league. I think that's much of a debate.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen, though. I mean, it's super fun to think about. If you have Devontae Adams and Keenan Allen running next to each other, that would be super cool. I mean, shit, I brought it up earlier when we were talking about Devonta Smith. Like, if you had Devonta Smith and Keenan Allen, it's kind of, the same, two route running experts, running next to each other. I think that the Packers are going to re-sign Devontae Adams. I mean, they'll figure out whatever they have to do with the cap, whether it's, restructuring 40 contracts or whatever it is, they'll figure it out and keep Devontae Adams because, look, he was the best receiver in the league last year. I think he's a pretty clear top 5 receiver right now.
Yeah.
I know before last year I ranked him like 8 or 9 in my top receivers, but like after last year, like he's kind of undisputed top 5.
He's ascended for sure.
Right. And so I think that Green Bay, someone did point out potentially Rodgers leaving at some point, so that maybe plays into it. But I still think no matter what, whether the quarterback's Rodgers or the quarterback is Jordan Love, I think they're going to want to keep Davante Adams.
Yeah, they traditionally keep players for 2 contracts. That's that's what they do with Corey Linsley, right? I think they have this kind of principle of like, if you're a very valuable player for us, it's 2 contracts, so they'll bring him back. I don't know, man. That's a weird situation, obviously, with Aaron Rodgers. But the one thing I'll say, like, one of the things I'm excited about to see for this Chargers team is how much the Green Bay offense and the Shanahan offense really has an influence. Because, I watched a little bit of the Green Bay film beforehand to kind of get a feel for the Shanahan system. And then when they signed Corey Linsley, I watched 6 or 7 games of them, and I was so jealous of how they would use Davante Adams. Like, it's been so frustrating to see the way that this team has used Keenan Allen the last few years, and watching the way the Packers use Davante Adams. It was just so much fun and so refreshing to see them really feature a player in the way that they should. So that's kind of my hope for Keenan Allen, is that he really gets to be featured in a way that maximizes his skill set and not just ask him to run a shit ton of slants every single game.
Yeah, I saw the stat on PFF that Keenan Allen had like the lowest yards per target or average, something like that last year on PFF. Like, that's just not how he should be being used, in my opinion. And see, that's one of the top 5 reasons that we should punch Shane Steichen in the face, as we said on last podcast. Yep. I think that Keenan Allen's going to be used a lot better, and it'll be interesting to see what Joe Lombardi does in his offense. But I think using Keenan Allen as just slants guy was very weird last year.
Yeah. So we'll get a couple more questions and then we'll wrap it up. Devin Oriema, who's your favorite person to follow on Twitter for draft info? Man, there's so many guys that are into this kind of industry right now. I know a lot of people hate him, but I really like Matt Miller. I think he does a fantastic job of putting a lot of quality content out there. And so I know a lot of people don't like him, but I think Matt Miller, obviously Daniel Jeremiah is another one. And then, the Locked On Draft podcast with Benjamin Solak and Trevor Sikkema is really like my favorite draft podcast to listen to. So shout out to those guys. I think they do fantastic work.
Yeah, I think the 2 guys for me are 2 Benjamins. I like Benjamin Solak a lot. Obviously, he's a Philly guy. And I like Benjamin Albright. Benjamin Albright is a good source, I think, for news. I know a lot of people debate like how much he actually knows, but he's got a lot of things right in drafts. So I like seeing, every once in a while he'll tweet out like, here's what I think the top 10 is right now. So I like seeing that and kind of going based on that. Solak, Benjamin Albright. I think Matt Miller is a good one, like Steven said. And Vach Lombardi obviously is a good one. Not really like a big. I don't know how big he is on Twitter. I actually don't follow him, but he does really good YouTube stuff. Even though I completely disagree with all of his cornerback takes. But I think there's tons of great people to follow.
Yeah, Vach Lombardi, it's good to listen to Vach because he has very different takes than is like what the general consensus is. Like listening to Marvin Wilson as the Kelvin defensive tackle. Yeah, he really likes Kelvin Joseph. So I think it is important in this kind of, in all of this process, to really listen to a variety of opinions, because I think, we all have certain guys that we like. And I think, people kind of zero in on who the consensus is. But I think Vach Lombardi is great because he brings a very different perspective to the table. So he's definitely someone. All right, last question here. What are we doing for draft day? So if you haven't been listening, we are going to live stream the draft. It's going to be a ton of fun. We are going to announce the winner of our jersey giveaway, which if you haven't seen, those details are on our Twitter page. We're also going to be giving away a couple gift cards to NFL Shop, a couple t-shirts, a couple hats. It's going to be a lot of fun. We did a Zoom draft party. Oh, it's pronounced Vosh. Excuse me, Vosh. Okay. Thank you, Craig. So we're going to have a ton of fun live streaming the draft this year. We're going to do another Q&A on Wednesday leading up to the draft. And then we're also going to do a live reaction after day 2. So it's going to be a lot of fun. We're really excited about the draft coverage that we're going to be bringing you guys next year. So please tune into those live streams. It's going to be a lot of fun. Like I said, just having a good time hanging out, talking about whoever is taking Mac Jones and making fun of them because that's a terrible fucking decision, and other things like that.
The good thing about our draft coverage this year on YouTube is that you get to see me be a sweaty freak for about 20 minutes straight because the Eagles pick at 12 and then the Chargers pick at 13, and that's going to be a fucking nightmare. I know now. So you get to see me, deal with my anxiety.
Yeah, man. Well, there is a rumor that they potentially are looking to trade back up, so maybe I'll get maybe you'll get a little break.
The Dolphins are looking to trade back down, and the Eagles are looking to trade back up. Why did you guys make the trade anyway?
Honestly, such a waste. All right, Alex. Any other thoughts before we head out of here today?
No. I mean, yeah. I actually do have one thought in particular. We're about to have a very special interview with somebody who may be on the Chargers.
Yes, sir.
Stay tuned for that one.
Oh, yeah. Our Monday episode is going to be super intense. Make sure you check that out. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been an awesome Q&A. Again, we'll be doing another one on Wednesday right before the draft, so please stay tuned for that, and stay tuned for everything else next week. Thanks, guys.